The night fell over Los Angeles like a thick blanket of exhaust and neon lights. The chaos of the day transformed into a distant roar of engines on Interstate 10, while the stale air mixed with gasoline and humidity penetrated deep into the bones. Under one of its many overpasses, where the city hid what it didn't want to see, a homeless man settled onto the cold concrete. His name was Ernest Rodriguez. He was 48 years old and had stopped expecting anything good from life a long time. Damp cardboard boxes. His thoughts dragged him to the same place as always, memories of what he had lost. He had worked for years in construction, carrying bricks, mixing cement, raising buildings that he would never inhabit. The economic crisis and bad luck took his job first, then his roof, then his family. Loneliness became his most faithful shadow. The overpass was witness to many forgotten lives. The smell of street food from nearby taco vendors contrasted cruelly with the emptiness of his. He didn't have the defeated air of those accustomed to street life. His face, though marked by dirt, transmitted calm, a serenity so strange in the middle of chaos that it forced Ernest to keep staring at him. "Who is this guy?" Ernest whispered in a low voice, as if fearing to wake the figure. The night became colder, and the echo of a dog barking in the distance accentuated the solitude. Ernest felt a contradictory impulse. Part of him wanted to walk away and not get involved, but another. Was just looking for somewhere to rest. The road has been long. Ernest, suspicious, frowned. Well, there's nothing here to find but cold and hunger. The other looked at him with a disarming calm. Rest is found where one decides to trust, he replied. That phrase struck Ernest in a way he didn't understand. Who spoke like that in the middle of misery? The silence returned, interrupted only by the roar of cars on the overpass. Ernest realized he was facing someone different, someone who didn't. Traffic, he sat observing his rough hands, full of cracks and scars. They were the hands of a worker, of someone who had built homes for others, but now had nowhere to sleep. He remembered how everything had begun to crumble years ago. He had worked on a construction site in the industrial district, under sweltering heat, when his foreman told him the project would be suspended. "There's no budget, buddy. There's no more work," they told him. At first, he thought it would be temporary, a couple. their daughter. That was the hardest blow, not losing the house, but losing the family. From then on, Ernest walked carrying not only the weight of hunger, but also the burden of guilt. His daily routine became mechanical, waking up with the cold, walking the streets looking for spare change, rummaging through dumpsters, hoping to find something still edible. Sometimes he approached the warehouse district, where vendors, amid the smell of cilantro, tomatoes, and fresh meat, would drop a wilted. Most wasn't the hunger or the cold, but the absence of his daughter. He thought about her laughter, about school days, about how she would run to hug him when he arrived tired from work. Now that little girl looked at him like a stranger. In the midst of that emotional darkness lived a memory that returned with frequency, that of his mother, praying every night. A simple woman, a Christian woman, who always lit a candle in front of a small image of Jesus. "Never lose faith, son," she used to tell. Buildings. He didn't know it yet, but that night something different awaited him. His life, marked by the routine of abandonment, was about to find a crack where hope would filter through. The night had fallen again over the city. Ernest returned to the same corner under the overpass with leftover sandwich wrapped in a crumpled napkin. The constant noise of cars passed like a metallic river over his head, and the cool air dragged the smell of gasoline mixed with smoke from the food cart still. Reflected a peace that didn't correspond to the place where they found themselves. The man slowly opened his eyes, and seeing Ernest, gave a calm smile. "Good evening again," he said. Ernest, surprised, responded with caution. "Still here." "I thought you had left." The stranger incorporated himself slowly. "The road brought me back. Sometimes our steps know where to stay better than we do." Ernest raised an eyebrow, confused. He was used to hearing insults, complaints, or pleas from those living. "Nice," the man answered without demanding anything more. Ernest, disbelieving, pulled out an almost empty water bottle from his backpack and handed it to him. The other drank with gratitude, closing his eyes as if that liquid were a delicacy. "Thank you, brother. You have no idea how much I needed that." Ernest watched him without understanding how someone could be grateful for something so minimal. The echo of the cars over the overpass mixed with the strange sensation growing in his chest. He settled against the overpass wall, and tried to ignore him, but he couldn't. There was something in his voice, in his way of speaking, that disarmed him little by little. He didn't seem crazy or like a drug addict, like many others who usually slept on the street. He was different. A silence settled for a few minutes. Only the distant bark of a dog and the hum of cars could be heard. Ernest surprised himself, looking at him again, intrigued by that peace radiating in the midst of chaos. And as seated with the same calm, observing the void as if neither cold nor hunger could reach him. That tranquility unsettled him. Ernest opened his backpack and took out half the sandwich he had saved. The bread was hard, the meat dry, but to him it was a treasure. He looked at it with desire and with guilt at the same time. His instinct screamed that he should keep it, that on the street every bite was a battle won. But the memory of Jesus' phrase, "Hunger isn't so harsh when one shares," haunted. His mind, Ernest frowned uncomfortably. "Hey, aren't you hungry?" he asked finally with a dry voice. Jesus tilted his head and responded gently, "Yes, a little, but if you don't have any, it's okay." That response disarmed Ernest. There was no demand or manipulation, only sincerity. He doubted a few more seconds until, with a resigned sigh, he broke the sandwich in two and handed him half. "Take it. It's not good, but it's all there is." Jesus received the food as if he had been handed a stealing glances at Jesus. There was something in the way he held the bread, in his manner of thanking, that made him look different from any other homeless person. Suddenly, Ernest spoke as if the words were escaping without permission. "I haven't shared anything in years. I can't even remember the last time I did." Jesus looked at him with tenderness. "Today you did it again. That means there's still much left in you." That phrase struck him deeply. Ernest shifted uncomfortably, as if someone Night advanced. Ernest's internal conflict kept beating in his chest. Would he cling to the selfishness learned on the street, or would he allow this encounter to open a door toward something different? The dawn surprised Ernest and Jesus, still under the overpass. The noise of city buses, mixed with the shouts of street vendors, announced the beginning of a new day in the city. Ernest, with tired eyes from having slept little, rubbed his face and looked at his companion. There was something strange. your head full of problems. Jesus held his gaze serenely. Everyone carries something. The difference is whether we let it sink us or we learn to use it to walk stronger. Those words bothered Ernest. He shifted on the cardboard that served as his improvised bed and tried to evade the conversation. But something within him asked to keep listening, as if those phrases touched a forgotten corner of his interior. "And what do you know about burdens?" he asked harshly. "You probably just got to the—" own bitterness. But even in loneliness, you can find meaning if you choose to open your heart. Ernest laughed bitterly. Open your heart. For what? So they can break it again. I tried, and it didn't work. Jesus spoke calmly, like someone telling a secret. The heart breaks so it can grow, just like the seed that must open to bear fruit. The silence became heavier. Ernest lowered his gaze. That simple comparison disarmed him. He remembered his mother talking to him about faith with similar. Amazement and slight fear. How? How do you know my name? Jesus smiled without responding. He only extended his hand, offering him a piece of bread that someone had given him that morning. Eat, you need strength. Ernest accepted, still confused. As he chewed, the feeling of strangeness grew. Who was this man really? How could he know so much of his pain without Ernest telling him? For the first time in years, Ernest's stomach wasn't just less empty, but also his heart. And although he— tasted a decent meal. Under the overpass, Jesus waited for him sitting on a stone, as if he knew Ernest would return. When he saw him, Ernest let out a tired sigh. "No luck today," he said, showing his empty hands. Jesus looked at him calmly. "Sometimes luck isn't measured in dollars." "That's easy for you to say when your stomach isn't growling like mine," Ernest replied, letting himself fall on the wet ground. Jesus remained silent for a few seconds, as if meditating each word. Hunger is— difficulty. The noise of the cars gradually faded, and against all logic, he began to relax. For the first time in years, the fear of freezing to death, the fear of not waking up, didn't torment him. A sensation of protection enveloped him as if someone were watching over his sleep. That night he dreamed. He saw himself walking down a long hallway full of light. At the end was his mother with the shawl she always wore in life. She smiled sweetly and called his name. "Ernest, son, you're not." Long time didn't feel completely empty. The hunger was still there, the pain too, but that voice from his dream echoed like a lighthouse in the darkness. He whispered to himself, confused, purpose. The dawn began to paint the sky with orange and violet tones. Ernest didn't remember it being so beautiful in years. Despite everything, something had changed inside him that night. He didn't know how to explain it, but he felt that this stranger, whom he had decided not to reject, was opening a incorporated himself, and the first thing he saw was Jesus sitting calmly, holding in his hands a steaming cup and a couple of tamales wrapped in corn husks. "Good morning, brother," greeted Jesus with a serene smile. "Let's have breakfast." Ernest looked at him incredulous. "Where did you get that?" Jesus shrugged as if the answer didn't matter. "Someone gave it to me on the road." There's always someone with something to share. The smell of the warm masa wrapped him, awakening his hunger even. This in years. They sat together under the overpass, sharing the tamales as if they were a banquet. Ernest surprised himself, telling him things he had never confessed to another homeless person. How he had lost his job, the breakup with his wife, the pain of not seeing his daughter. Jesus listened without interrupting, without judging, as if each word had immense value. "I feel invisible," Ernest said at one point with his voice breaking. "People pass by me like I'm trash thrown on them." Tamales, atole, sweet bread. In the distance, a woman scolded her son for arriving late to school. Everything sounded ordinary, common, but for Ernest, there was something extraordinary in that moment. For the first time in years, he wasn't eating alone or in a hurry. He felt companionship, human warmth, and that was a miracle in itself. He finished the last bite slowly, savoring it as if it were the most important of his life. Then he looked at Jesus with some shyness. "Thank you. Not just for." Possible that someone like Jesus had arrived in his life exactly when he needed it most. And within him, a seed of hope began to germinate. The breakfast had returned to Ernest a bit of strength, but hunger soon returned along with the harsh reality of the street. With a sigh, he decided he couldn't continue depending on luck or others' compassion. He got up determined to look for work, though deep inside he knew the task would be almost impossible. Jesus accompanied him in silence, walking at "What can I do for you?" she asked with distrust. "Work. Anything. I can wash dishes, sweep, clean tables." The woman twisted her face. "We need someone presentable here. Customers don't want a homeless person near the food." Ernest felt the humiliation like a blow to the stomach. He clenched his fists containing his rage and left without a word. Outside, Jesus was waiting. "You tried. That's already a step," he said calmly. "A step toward what?" Ernest replied with bitterness. "It's always." There was no place for him. They sat on a bench in MacArthur Park. Children played around. Families walked their dogs. Young people laughed while eating ice cream. Ernest, with his arms resting on his knees, observed that life that no longer belonged to him. Look at them. They matter. "I'm invisible to everyone." Jesus, calm, responded, "You're not invisible, but the world is afraid to look pain in the face. That's why they reject you. Not because you're worthless, but because you remind them." Tomorrow will be another day. Don't give up. Every attempt counts. Ernest looked at him with frustration, but also with a slight glimmer of hope. What if I never get anything? What if this is my destiny? Jesus held his gaze. Destiny isn't written on the streets, Ernest. It's written in your heart. As long as you have the will to get up, your story isn't finished. The wind blew through the park trees, and although the rejection still hurt like an open wound, those words made him resist a they. Person even more deteriorated than Ernest. His face was pale, his lips dry, and he coughed forcefully. He had a poorly cared-for wound on his leg that was oozing pus. The smell was unbearable. Ernest stopped. His first reaction was to move away. The street had hardened him. It had taught him not to get too involved, because carrying others' problems could mean more weight than he could support. Without hesitation, Jesus knelt immediately next to the man. "He's sick," he said firmly. "He needs." Enter a community pharmacy where a woman, moved by the situation, sold them some bandages and alcohol at half price. They also received a couple of fever pills. On the way back, Ernest knelt next to the sick man. With trembling hands, he cleaned the wound carefully and covered it. The homeless man looked at him with glassy eyes and barely managed to murmur, "Thank you." No one ever stopped. Ernest swallowed hard. He felt a strange warmth in his chest. Helping him hadn't erased his hunger or his. difficulty. Ernest stood up and walked a few steps away, looking at the sky. For a moment, he remembered when he cared for his daughter when she was sick. That feeling of responsibility, of love, returned suddenly, and he realized he still had that capacity within him. They walked together to a plaza where other homeless people gathered. They shared a piece of bread that someone gave them and told others what they had done. To Ernest's surprise, they were listened to with respect. One of them even victim and more human. And without knowing it, that simple act had marked the beginning of a new direction in his life. The air in the city smelled like home-cooked meals when Ernest approached the market. The bustle wrapped around him, the shout of vendors offering tomatoes at a good price, the sound of knives chopping meat on cutting boards, the steam rising from the cooking pots. Hunger accompanied him as always, but that day there was a different spark inside him. After what he had, woman evaluated him carefully, noticing his worn clothes and the exhaustion in his eyes. Ernest felt another rejection coming, but to his surprise, the woman sighed. Okay, but just for a few days, trial basis. If you don't work out, you're gone. Ernest's heart leaped. Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down. That same day, he started cleaning tables, collecting plates with rice scraps, washing dishes in warm water that burned his hands where wounds were still open. The smell of the stews. It's little, barely a few dollars. Jesus interrupted him gently. The value isn't in the amount, but what it means for you. Today you proved you can get back up. As they walked together through the street lit by street lamps, Ernest felt less weight on his back. It wasn't the definitive solution to his misery, but it was a beginning, a break. He looked at the people passing and no longer felt the same shame as before. He had something to tell, something that distinguished him from absolute. That you do it with your heart. Ernest closed his eyes, letting those words envelop him. For the first time in a long time, not only was his stomach full thanks to the diner's food, but he also had a bit of pride. And although the future remained uncertain, that night he lay down with the conviction that hope could return even in the deepest darkness. The small job at the diner had returned to Ernest a breath of dignity. Every day he returned to the overpass tired, but with the pride of having. Memories. When he arrived, he stopped in front of the metal door painted blue. His hand trembled before knocking. Finally, he knocked softly. The door opened, and a young woman with long hair appeared with features he recognized immediately. It was his daughter, now a teenager, much taller than he remembered. Time had stolen entire years of his life. "Dad?" she asked, with a tone more of surprise than affection. Ernest swallowed hard. "Yes, it's me. I wanted to see you both. Talk for a moment." He seeking a spark of compassion. "Daughter, I've thought about you every day." But the young woman lowered her gaze uncomfortably. "I don't know what to say to you. I don't know you anymore." Those words cut through him like a knife. Ernest felt shame and pain mixing, leaving him breathless. He stepped back, fearing he would break in front of them. "It's okay. I don't want to bother you. I just wanted to know you were doing well." His ex-wife closed the door without adding more. The metallic sound. A hand on his shoulder. True love knows how to wait. "Wait for what?" Ernest replied with rage. "She doesn't want to see me. She rejected me to my face." Jesus didn't get upset. Pain doesn't erase love. Sometimes it just needs time. Your task isn't to force her, but to keep showing that you're still here. And if she never forgives you, then you will have loved anyway. That's never in vain. The silence returned, interrupted only by the distant roar of engines. Ernest reclined on the wet. Clearing that seemed passing, but soon it became a hoarse sound that left him breathless. One night, while the wind blew with fury, Jesus trembled wrapped in only an old rag. Ernest looked at him worried. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, although the answer was evident. Jesus smiled weakly. "It's just the cold. Nothing I can't handle." But Ernest recognized when someone was sick. He had seen many homeless people get ill on the street and disappear without anyone asking about them. He felt a knot. Backpack and took out his only valuable possession, a blanket he had saved for himself. It was his most precious protection against freezing nights. He held it in his hands, hesitating. If he gave it to him, he would be vulnerable. If he didn't, Jesus would get worse. The dilemma tore at him, but finally he bent over his companion and covered him with the blanket. "Take it. You need it." "Yes, but you more." Jesus looked at him surprised with a special light in his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" through his bones. His body shook, but inside him something different warmed him, a certainty of having done the right thing. The hours passed slowly. Ernest didn't sleep, watching over Jesus, who breathed heavily. Every time he heard him cough, fear struck again. He remembered his daughter, remembered the blue door closing in his face, and thought that maybe he still had an opportunity to show he could love without conditions. The night enveloped them in dense shadows. Ernest, with numb lips and stiff from the night without his blanket. He turned looking for Jesus, expecting to see him still sleeping under the blanket, but the space was empty. Jesus, he called out, sitting up abruptly. He looked around nervously. He walked a few steps, pushing aside cardboard and old bags, but there was no sign of him. The overpass that until recently had shared company felt desolate again. Ernest's heart accelerated. A sensation of abandonment struck him forcefully. He probably went to look for food. Ground with eyes burning with frustration. "Why did you leave?" he murmured. "You couldn't disappear like that, could you? After everything." It was then when he noticed something under the stone where Jesus used to sit, a folded sheet. He took it with trembling hands and unfolded it. It was a message written in firm, clear handwriting. "What you did for me, you did for him." Ernest read the phrase over and over, not fully understanding. He felt a chill run down his spine. He remembered every expecting an answer. The noise of the cars over the overpass enveloped him. But in the middle of the chaos, he heard an echo within him, a soft voice that seemed to come from the deepest part of his being. You were never alone. The memory of the dream with his mother returned to his mind, fitting like a lost piece of a puzzle. Everything made sense. Jesus wasn't just a man without a home. He was the living presence of something greater, something divine that had descended into his misery too. Every time he passed the stone where his friend used to sit, he remembered that note. "What you did for me, you did for him." Those words accompanied him like an invisible compass. With the few dollars he earned at the diner, he began buying extra bread to distribute among other homeless people. At first they looked at him with suspicion, surprised that someone equally poor would worry about them. But little by little looks of distrust transformed into gratitude. An elderly woman wrapped in a Tired he heard within him, "The one who shares never goes empty." And it was true. The more he helped, the more full he felt inside. When he came home one day, he saw the homeless people he had helped gathered together. They had scrounged together a few dollars to eat together. They greeted him with affection, like family. The owner, who had initially viewed him with suspicion, noticed this and told him, "You have a good hand with people. It's clear they respect you." Ernest smiled humbly. They The distance. She observed him with a certain shyness, as if unsure whether to approach or run away. Ernest smiled at her without expecting anything. They didn't exchange words, but that look contained something different from the coldness of the earlier encounter. It was a beginning, a crack in the wall of rejection. That night, resting under the overpass, he reflected in silence. Before, he had seen himself as a defeated man, reduced to surviving. Now he felt part of something larger. He. Stone, and the certainty that his life had value. And with each act of kindness, Ernest confirmed that the encounter under the overpass wasn't coincidence, but the beginning of a mission that was barely starting. Time passed, and with it, the life of Ernest took a direction he never would have imagined that first night under the overpass. From being a broken man, lost in the city's forgetfulness, he became someone others sought for comfort. The homeless community saw him as an older brother. The market, he heard a familiar voice. "Dad." He turned, and there she was. His daughter stood there with an unsure look, as if still doubting whether to take that step. Ernest felt his heart would burst in his chest. He didn't want to rush her, simply smiled with tears accumulating in his eyes. She approached slowly. "I saw you helping those people. You're not the same man I remembered." "I've changed, daughter," he said with a breaking voice. "I lost many things, but I learned that as long as—" the man who saw charity, nor the one who cursed his fate. He was someone who inspired others to believe that change was possible. Hope had returned not as an easy gift, but as the fruit of sacrifice, love, and rediscovered faith. He raised his gaze and whispered, "Thank you, Jesus, wherever you are." A warm breeze crossed the overpass at that instant, and Ernest knew he was not alone, never had been. And so that homeless man who one day shared a sandwich with a stranger under a bridge was— of hope and strength. And now don't go anywhere. Click on the video that appears on your screen and keep discovering stories that can inspire your life, just as this one did for Ernest. No story is too small, and no one is too lost to find their way back.